Join me as we learn the Chitas for Sunday, Parshas Behar-Bechukosai, the two Torah readings, the last and final two Torah readings of the book of Leviticus, beginning with chapter 25 and verse 1. Today we're going to learn about the laws of the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year. And God spoke to Moses, continuing to communicate him at the foot of Mount Sinai, saying, the Har Sinai weren't all commandments set at Mount Sinai. Ma inyan Shemitah Eitzel Har Sinai. Why does specifically this law pertaining to the sabbatical year tell us that it was set at Mount Sinai? V'haloi kol hamitzvos nemer Sinai. Weren't all the commandments set at Mount Sinai? Ella, it's coming to teach us. Ma Shemitah nemer kol Yisrael Peretis Avadiktuk Sinai. Just like we see over here now, the sabbatical years, all its rules and details and its fine-tuned details were set at Sinai. So too, all the laws were set in its general rule and its detail and its fine details were all discussed and learned at Sinai. This is the way it's learned in Torah's Kehanim. And it seems to me that this would be the explanation, because we do find by other commandments when we talk about the different details that are mentioned. So why does it say these commandments? So he says, because we don't find about the sabbatical year mentioned again in the plains of Moab in the book of Deuteronomy. V'im ba akasav limit kan al kol diber shenedaber l'Moshe Sinai yukulam k'leseim dekritayim v'chazor v'nishnu bar b'smayev. Over here, what we're seeing over here, something unique about this, is that when it comes to the laws about the sabbatical year, we do not find that it was repeated again in the book of Devarim. We know that in the book of Devarim, Moshe repeats many of the commandments. In fact, they're adding on many as well about the details and the laws of that were given to the Jewish people. So therefore, we know that all the details were also said here to Moshe on Mount Sinai. If so, why does it say the word Behar Sinai in this case? Meaning that the verse is telling us that whenever all the mitzvahs that were given to Moshe, all of them were said from Mount Sinai. The general details were said at Mount Sinai, and then were repeated by the plains of Moab in the right before Moshe's passing in the book of Deuteronomy. Verse 2. David el b'nei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people. V'amart aleim means you say to them, Kisavoyu al-haaretz, when you'll come to the land asher ani nosen lechem, that I'm going to give you. V'shav saret Shabbos l'Hashem, and the land must rest the Sabbath to God. Shabbos l'Hashem, l'shem Hashem, for the sake of God. Kashem shenemar b'Shabbos Bereshis, as it says also by the Shabbos, by the day of Shabbos in the book of Genesis, that the seventh day is a day of rest for God. So too the sabbatical year is a year of rest for God. Interesting to note that the Rebbe mentions here, when you look at the verse, it seems like that already the first year is the sabbatical year, when only later on the next verse that tells us that 6 years you would work and then the seventh year you rest. And this is telling us that when a person goes out to work, he has to have in mind that the whole purpose of work is that on the seventh day that he should be resting. So too in a person's own micro world, and so too in a person's own life, even though he has to deal with the mundane, he should realize that the ultimate goal is to have that rest, is to spend the time, Shabbos l'Hashem, have a sabbatical with God. Verse 3. Sheish shanim tizar sadecha, for 6 years you will plant your field. For sheish shanim tizmer karmecha, and for 6 years you will prune your vineyard. Vasaftas tfuasa, and you will gather the land's produce. Verse 4. Ubashana shvius, and in the seventh year, Shabbos Shabbosin Lashem, Shabbos Shabbosin Yiyel Haaretz, you must give the land a complete rest. Shabbos Lashem, a rest for God. Sodcha le'sizra, your field you will not sow. V'charmecha le'sizmar, nor will you prune your vineyard. Yiyel Haaretz, not only to the field, lasodis v'lakramim, to the fields and to the vineyards. Le'sizmer, shekoitzrin zemerisau, that they would usually trim the vines to make it better, so it should be able to grow better. V'targumai, and as the Targum says, le'sichsach, you should not cut it. V'doimele, we find a similar terminology, koitzim kesuchim, that the thorns that were cut, that dried up very quickly. Srufa be'esh kesucha, that it was burnt very quickly, that the talking about the Jewish people that are in exile amongst the nations of the world, like the vines that are cut and become very quickly fuel for fire. A sviach ketzircha, Afilu loizarite, next verse, verse 5. A sviach ketircha. You may not reap the aftergrowth. Loisikser, you should not reap. Ves inve nizarecha. And as well as the grapes, you may not pick. Leisiftzar, you shouldn't pick. Shnas Shabbos and Yiyah La'aretz, it must be a year of rest for the land. Sviach ketzircha, afilu leizarata, even if you didn't plant it, that means it's growing wild. V'yitzamcha, it started to grow in its own, and azer shenafel ba'beis hakatzir, from the seeds that fell during harvest. Kari safiach, those are called safiach, meaning things that grew on its own. The aftergrowth. Loisikter liyes machzig boy b'sharka kishar katzir elahefker yelakel. Not that you're not allowed to cut it at all, meaning that you're not allowed to cut it, that it should be completely yours, like all the other harvests on a regular year, but it has to be hefker, anybody is allowed to take it. Nizirecha, separated, that you separated it, that you did not allow others to take, and meaning that you did not make it hefker. Do not make it available for everybody. Loy sifter, you shouldn't collect them. Oysam ein chabayter, those you should not collect, you haven't cut. Ela mina mufkar, what can you take for yourself? Only things from that you made hefker, that you made for everybody to take equally as yourself. As well, it's important to point out that during the sabbatical year, one was not allowed to plow, so even if he was going to make it hefker. Over here it's telling us what a person's allowed to take. What he was harvesting, he can harvest from himself, anything that he made for everybody available as well. Verse 6. And it will be a Sabbath for the land, and you'll be able to eat it. La'avdecha, for your servant, la'ma'asechan, maid servants, l'schirchan, the one you hire, v'l'seishafchan, the one that lives with you, Hagarim imach, the ones that live with you. Even though I told you you're not allowed to harvest, you're not allowed to cut, I did not prohibit you from eating or enjoying it. Just don't act as ownership over it. It's equally available for everybody. But everybody should be able to get it. You, the hired one, the one that's living there, the resident, everybody has equal opportunity to be able to take it. You cannot show any ownership of it at all. You can eat from the ones that are part of the sabbatical year, but you cannot eat from things that you set aside, and you haven't made it hefker, you haven't made it available for everybody, and that are prohibited for you to eat from it, unless you make it available for everybody to eat. Because it says in the book of Exodus, that the poor people will eat it. I would think that rich people may not eat from it. Therefore the Torah tells us, you are allowed to have it, your servant, and your maidservant, the owners, the servants, the maidservants, everybody's allowed to have it, and it's not only available for the poor people. Meaning including the non-Jews. Verse 7, and to your animals, all the produce must be available as well as for your animals and for your domestic animals, undomesticated animals, that you're in your land. All the produce will be available for them to eat. Rashi, what is it telling us? If it's telling us for the domesticated animals, the non-domesticated animals, what's the Torah teaching us here? If a non-domesticated animal which you're not obligated to give its food, shouldn't your own animal which you are obligated to give it food, that you have to give it food, for sure should be able to allow it to eat it? So why does the verse have to tell me and to your domesticated animal? It compares a domesticated animal to a non-domesticated animal. Because as long as you are allowing the undomesticated animals to eat from your field, you can then give from this exact food to your own animals that you have put aside in your home. But then what happens if now there's no more food for the animals to eat in the field? Then you have to take out all the leftover food that you have in your home that you put aside and make it available for all animals as well. Verse 8. Now we go on to learn about the laws pertaining to the Jubilee year. You will now count for yourself 7 sabbatical years. That means 7 cycles 7 times. As we see, Sheva Shanim Sheva Pamim, 7 cycles 7 times. Sheva Shapsis Hashanim. Then this time period of the 7 sabbatical cycles will thus amount to Teishav Arbaim Shana, to 49 years. What does this mean? So Rashi explains why the Torah has to go through this enumeration. Can't we just make the math on our own? Shapsis Shanim, Shmitais Shanim, 7 sabbatical years. That means 7 times 7. Yochel, I would have thought Yasa Sheva Shanim b'Tzufis Shmita v'Yasa Yevel Achareim. Just to not just one Shemitah, but just do 7 years consecutively, and then have a jubilee right afterwards. Talmud Leimar Sheva Shanim Sheva Pamim. You have to have it 7 times, 7 cycles. Have Emer Kol Shmita Shmita Bezmana. You have to have each one of those 7 cycles, each one of those sabbatical years. So you have 7 sabbatical years, and after the 7th sabbatical year, then you have the 50th year becomes the Jubilee year. Why does the Torah have to explain to you the cycle and the totality of the 7 times 7? To teach you, what happens if a person thinks, well, I didn't count, I didn't observe those 49 years. You still have to observe the Jubilee year at the end of the 49 years. This, and the simple interpretation, is as follows. The simple interpretation is that you're going to count 7 times 7 sabbatical years, which is 7 years of 7 sabbatical years, which will give you the number of 49. Because later on he's going to say you should make the 50th year holy. So therefore he tells you have to have first the 49. And once you have the 50th after the 49, that's the one that becomes holy. Verse 9. Regardless if you observe the sabbatical years during that 49-year period or not, you must proclaim by a shofar blast. And you will make a shofar blast in the 7th month on the 10th day of that month. You must proclaim the shofar throughout your land, which is on the day on the day of Yom Kippur, the day of Atonement. You must proclaim the shofar throughout your land. What is the word for avarta? Comes from the same terminology, vayaviru keil b'machana, that they made. They announced it in the camp. Losh nachraza. It's a terminology of announcing, saying that it's a jubilee year. Why does the Torah tell me that it's the 10th of the 7th month? If it's the 10th of the 7th month, I know it's Yom Kippur. And if he tells me it's Yom Kippur, I know it's the 10th of the 7th month. Why the redundancy? In Kain Lamenemer Basar L'Chedesh, why does it have to say the 10th month, the 10th of the month? To tell you, to tell you that even though it's Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur is called a Shabbos, on the Jubilee year, sounding of the shofar would supersede the Shabbos wherever it may be. However, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, on Rosh Hashanah when we sound the shofar, throughout the land of Israel and throughout any other place other than the Holy Temple or only other than the Beis Din, they would not sound the shofar. Like we know when Shabbos comes out on Rosh Hashanah, when Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos, we don't sound the shofar. Over here he's telling you, however, when it comes to the Jubilee year coming out Yom Kippur, then we would sound the shofar in all places. While Rosh Hashanah, Imel Bebezdin Bavad, would only be done in the Bezdin, in the rabbinical court. Verse 10. And you must sanctify the 50th year. And you will call, and you must proclaim freedom throughout the land, for all its inhabitants. Yovel, talking about the Jewish bondservants. Yovel, this is considered the Jubilee year. Tielachem will be for you. And each person will return back to his homeland. And each person will then also return to his family. Rashi, who are we talking about here? Vikidashtem. When you could sanctify it? Bichnisasa. On the first day of the Jubilee year, you would make it holy, which is Rosh Hashanah. The Bezdin says, this year is holy, this year is sanctified, and it makes it through the sanctification, even though that the actual sounding of the shofar only happened 10 days later. But on the beginning of the first day of the year, they would say this is a special sanctified year. Krosam Dreri will call freedom. For who? Lavadim, for the servants that would go out to freedom. Bein here, so whether the person had his ear pierced, because this is talking about a servant that did not want to leave after 6 years, and therefore he had to have his ear pierced, and he said, I want to stay with my servants, and when it comes to Jubilee year, he goes free regardless. Whether it's a person who was just recently sold, and even 6 years have not yet been completed, he also goes out by the Jubilee year as well. Rabbi Yehuda says, why does the Torah say, Ma'al Loshin Dreir? Why does he say the word Dreir for freedom? This means to tell us, like a person, this is now that every person can live where he wants, and he does not have to answer or be in any other person's domain, telling us that a servant is free from his master's home, telling him that he can go live where he wants. This year is going to be different from all the other years. With giving its name, that now it has a different name, it's called by something else. What is the name that we are going to call it? Yovel Shema, the Jubilee year. Hashem Tkiya Shofar, by the fact that it was sounded the shofar, which also means a yovel. The shofar is called a yovel, the sound of the yovel. And therefore, as we find by the Mount Sinai, it says, when the sound of the shofar, that's when they went up on the mountain. So therefore, this year is called the Jubilee year, which is referring to the shofar that was sounded on Yom Kippur. That the fields will go back to the original owner, as we're going to learn later on as well. And each person goes back to his family, which includes the person who had his ears pierced, that at this point he goes back regardless whether he worked 6 years or not. Whenever Yovel comes, he returns to his family. Verse 11, Yovel, this is the Jubilee year. Shnasa chamishim shana, the 50th year. Tia lachem will be for you. Lois yizro, you will not plant. Lois sikturu, you will not harvest. Asficha, the leftover, the aftergrowth. Velois siftiru as nizira, and you may not pick up the grapes that have you set aside for yourself. Yovel shnasa chamishim shana. Ma Talmud lemer. Why does it have to repeat it again if we just said it's the 50th year? Because he says that you should sanctify the 50th. I would think that maybe it's from Rosh Hashanah, and therefore you're just adding 10 days. But because the freedom of the slaves only happened on Yom Kippur. So therefore it tells us, as it's explained, therefore the Torah again points out that the Jubilee year is only in the 50th year and not more, as it's explained in Rosh Hashanah and in Torah's Chayanim. Es nizireha, of the leftover grapes, the grapes that fell that you set aside. It's anavim amshumaras, those grapes that you set aside for yourself. But you're allowed to pick from those that you made hefker that everybody can collect. It's just like the laws are mentioned in the 7th and sabbatical year. So too the laws apply by the Jubilee year. Nimtza, what do you find over here? Comes out. You have 2 years which are sanctified and holy, one right after the other. Shnas Memtes, the 49th year, which is the sabbatical year, and then the following year, Shnas HaChamishim, the Jubilee year, Yovel, which will be as well, applies all the laws of the sabbatical year too. Verse 12, Ki Yoveli, because it is the Yovel, Kodesh Tia Lachem, it should remain sanctified for you. You will eat from the field. You may eat any particular type of produce from the field that you have stored away, as long as this produce is available for everybody, as we mentioned previously with the laws of Hefker. Kodesh Tia Lachem, sanctified it should be for you, meaning that these fruits of the sabbatical year, as well as the fruits of the Jubilee year, are considered holy items, holy fruits. Toisefes dameh b'kedusha. Meaning, because the same way this is the same way any other item that they would use, if somebody would sell them, he would have to pay to be able to redeem it, and then he would have to, whatever money would been bought, that thing becomes holy with it as well. So with the same ideas also, the idea is that the money makes the item holy. Yochel, I would say, teitzehi lechulin. I would think that in itself should be able to, by the very fact that you sell it, should now not be considered something holy. Talmud leimar, tia, it should be baviyasa tehe. It stays the way it was originally. That means it'll always stay holy. And the very fact that it grew in the sabbatical year, it will always stay holy, even though you may redeem it and you have sold something with it. Whatever you will buy with its money will always be considered holdiness. The holdiness will stay with it forever with it. Min asada teichlu, al yedei asada teichel min habayis. Because of the field, you will eat it. Meaning, because the very fruit is now in the field and anybody can eat it, therefore you are not now allowed to eat it as well. She'im kol lechayim min asada, at tzarich levayir min habayis. That means if in your home you still have food from that kind and the animals don't have anything to eat, then you have to take it out of your home as well and make it hefker, make it available for everybody. The same laws that are by the sabbatical years apply the laws by the Jubilee year. Verse 13. During this Jubilee year, tashuvu ish al chuzasai, you must return the land to its. You must return to his land property. Each person goes back to their own property. Rashi, tashuvu ish al chuzasai. Vakvar nemar. It hasn't already mentioned that in verse 10. V'shavta ish al chuzasai. Everybody goes back to his land. El rabbis, it's coming to include hamecher sadeu. If somebody sold his field, v'omad b'noyu gola, and his son came back and then redeemed it. Shecheres la aviv b'yevel, that it goes back to the original owner, to his father, being that it's now the Jubilee year. He has to, even though the son redeemed it for his father, but now it goes back to his father in the Jubilee year. Verse 14. And now, as we mentioned before, that being that it was commercially forbidden to produce on the sabbatical or Jubilee year, what happens if a person does some type of transgresses this prohibition? What is then the law and how do we go about it? As the Torah continues concerning the laws pertaining the Jubilee year. If when you sell the movable possessions to your fellow Jew, or you have bought it from a fellow Jew, you must not cheat one another. Rashi, what does this mean and what are we referring to here? Simple interpretation, the meaning, if a person sells something to somebody else, as the Torah goes on to say, don't cheat from one another. When you sell something, sell to a Jew and not to a non-Jew. When you come to sell, try to sell, keep business between each other. When you need to buy something, it's better to buy from a Jew and not from the non-Jew. Therefore the Torah says, or you bought it from your friend. Over here the Torah is telling us that it's preferred that you buy and sell from one of your own. Al toinu, do not cheat. The word cheating over here, many times the word toinu can also mean to hurt somebody with words and saying something which may be offensive to a person. But in this case, we're talking about a noas mamin, which is cheating with money. That a person should make sure that he should not cheat another person with money, causing him to lose an extra amount, price gouging or whatever it may be, as we're soon going to see. Verse 15. So when you are purchasing, you may purchase from your fellow Jew according to the number of years that have elapsed or that will be since the previous Jubilee year. If according to the amount of years after the Jubilee year, you will buy from your friend. And therefore he must sell you according to the number of years that expected for the crops to grow until the next such sabbatical or Jubilee year. Rashi, the simple interpretation, to be able to explain the Mishnah, the pasuk according to its simple interpretation. Over here, the Torah is explaining what does it mean cheating. When you're coming to buy or sell a land, calculate how many more years into Jubilee year, and see how much crop this field is able to make. And based on this, this is what the guy will sell, and that's what the person will buy. At the end of the day, he's going to have to return it back to the original guy, so it's more of like a lease than a sale. If there's only very few years left until Yovel, and this guy's going to sell it for a lot of money, then you're cheating the buyer. If there's many years, he's going to eat from a lot of wheat. Then you're cheating the seller. So therefore he has to buy it, according to whatever, evaluate how much time is left. Therefore it says an amount of wheat that it will be able to make. He should sell it to you. You go according to the amount of years that this property will be able to produce wheat, and based on that is what you're going to sell it to the buyer. The rabbis have learned from this as well, that if somebody sells his field, he's not allowed to go and redeem it and buy it back, and he has to allow the buyer to have at least 2 years. That even though that he sold it to him while the wheat was still standing, it hasn't been harvested. That means he's getting it for 2 years, but 3 crops. Still in all, he's not allowed to buy, he is allowed to keep it for at least 2 years, and he should not be able to go and redeem it 2 years to guarantee to be able to make produce from this field. The meaning, even according to the second interpretation, that one should not redeem it for 2 years, also stays in its simple interpretation. Meaning, that meaning that you have to make a calculation of how many years you should be able to collect the wheat, harvest the wheat from it, which is a minimum amount of 2 years, in not years of when there is a plague or something of the nature which causes a drought, which will not allow the wheat to grow properly, and that is not part of those years. The minimum amount, because it says b'mispar shnei tevuos. Shnei tevuos can mean literally 2. The minimum amount is 2. Verse 16. The more remaining years is the more you may increase your sale. And according to the fewer years, you may decrease your offer of the purchase price. Because the bottom line is, he's selling you not the land outright, but the number of crops that you'll be able to produce on that field, and therefore it's considered more of a lease. Sell it for more. You buy it for less. Verse 17, you should not cheat man his fellow. You should be fearful of God, because I am God your God. Over here, even though we already mentioned about cheating a person with money, over here the Torah is continuing to add about hurting a person with words. You should not pain his fellow. You should not give him advice which is not appropriate for him. He should make sure that he would be able to, when he gives him advice and he tells him something, he should be able to make sure that he should be able to profit from it, and he should be able to be for the benefit of that individual. One may ask, who knows, maybe I can say, I meant to tell him the right thing. If I meant to say bad or not. Therefore the Torah says, you will fear God. He knows what you're thinking. He knows if you really had the guy's good intention or not, the best thing for the guy in mind or not. Anytime we find something which is dependent, or which you will only know what's in a person's heart, the Torah uses the terminology of you should fear God, that God knows what's truly in your heart and what you truly intended. Did you mean to hurt the person or not? Verse 18. And you will do my laws, and you will then safeguard my ordinances. And you will do them, and you'll be able to live on the land securely. Rashi, because if they don't keep the laws of the sabbatical year, this will cause them to be exiled from the land, as we see later on in verse 26 when it talks about the repercussions that happen, the consequences that happen to the Jewish people. It says, only then will the land want and desire its sabbatical years, meaning that because of the lack of observance of the sabbatical year, that's why they were exiled. V'shivim shana shel galus Bavel keniged shmita shebitloya. If you look at the 70 years that the Jewish people were exiled in the Babylonian exile, which is the period between the first and second temple, that was for the 70 sabbatical years that the Jewish people did not properly observe. This concludes the Torah reading for Sunday, Parshas Behar-Bechukosai.